My name is Paige Dupuy.
My name is Neil Dupuy.
And I'm Bridget Eichenberg. And this is Leading Ladies,
a legacy of social reform.
Early in the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution offered new opportunities to earn money. Many American men left the farms for jobs in towns and cities.
The world of business, trade, and government was viewed as a place for men. Women, on the other hand, belonged at home where their task was to raise children.
At the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott gathered with others to discuss the social, civil, and religious status, as well as the rights of women. This would light a fire for the women's reform movement. But 50 years later, women were still struggling to gain independent voices and representation in society and government. A new generation of leadership was needed to turn these feminist ideals into reality.
This is the story of Elizabeth Bisland and Nellie Bly, two young journalists in the Progressive Era who used their unique positions as female reporters to become a voice for women who were powerless in the workplace, government, and sometimes even their own homes.
These ladies would embrace the legacy of social reform and establish themselves as leaders of women's rights.
Hi, Nellie, ho, Nellie, listen love to me. I'll sing for you, play for you, a dulcet melody.
Well, if it isn't my star reporter, Nellie Bly, what can I do for you?
I've been thinking over my next story. I just finished this book that was published in 1873 by Jules Verne. It's about a gentleman named Phileas Fogg who travels around the world in 80 days. I think I should try just that. Progress has been made in communication and transportation, so now's the time to put this book to the test. I have the whole route planned out. I used the book as a base for my itinerary, and with a few adjustments, I think this really can be done.
Whoa, Nellie, do you mean to tell me that you want to make this trip alone?
Yes. The World newspaper has offices in all the major cities across the globe. I could use those as checkpoints to telegraph stories back to you for publication. I've thought of it all.
Must I remind you that you are a woman? A young girl can't just go gallivanting around the globe alone. It would be irresponsible of me to send you by yourself. This is no job for a lady. We can send one of our male reporters.
Fine. You send the man, but I'll start the same day for another newspaper and I'll beat him.
Nellie, be reasonable. You have to understand that this is a very odd request. The newspaper industry only hires a handful of female journalists. You're a good reporter, Nellie. When you posed as a factory worker, it exposed the horrible working conditions of the women there. And you opened the eyes of New York to the selling of babies on the black market, but this would be a very dangerous trip and I would have no way of guaranteeing your safety.
Mr. Cockrell, this is something I really believe in. I could show the world that women can do anything a man can. Women are just as competent and capable as men. You don't have any doubts in my reporting skills or my plan for the trip. The only doubt that you have in me is that I am a woman, and that is disappointing.
Okay, I'll suggest the idea to Mr. Pulitzer. He might just go for this wild idea.
The nerve of that man. Does he feel the need to remind me I'm a woman? I am keenly aware of the fact that I live in a male-dominant society and how few rights I have. When I was a girl in Pennsylvania, my mother had to remarry after my father died to support our family. The man she married was an abusive drunk. We were lucky to escape him. Seeing my own mother beaten and hearing him call her a whore is something I can never forget. We were powerless. From then on, I decided I would never have to rely on a man again. When I came of age, I was expected to become a teacher or a cook. To get this job as a reporter for the World newspaper, I had to go undercover into an insane asylum at Blackwell's Island. I had to fake being a lunatic to expose the mistreatments of the patients there, and I didn't even know if I would make it out alive. But I said I could, and I would, and I did. After my story ran, the city of New York dedicated almost $1 million to help provide better care for the mentally ill. No one cared how dangerous that was for a woman, and I was happy to do it. I love taking risks for my assignments and going undercover to get a good story, but I am the last person who needs reminding of their gender. This woman can do the job.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Pulitzer sends Nellie Bly around the world.
Goodbye, New York. I'd rather die than come back unsuccessful.
Pulitzer advertised this trip for weeks, and due to this promotion, the Cosmopolitan sent their own female reporter on the same trip headed the opposite direction. As Nellie Bly boarded the Augusta Victoria going east, she had no idea that there was another young girl preparing for her own adventure on a train heading west.
All aboard! If, on the 13th of November, 1889, some amateur prophet foretold that I'd be spending Christmas Day of that year in the Indian Ocean, I hope I should call to his attention the quote, "The Lord loveth a cheerful liar," and bid him go in peace. On the 14th of November, I was summoned to the Cosmopolitan office where I'm employed. They told me I'd be leaving on a trip. It appeared Joseph Pulitzer had dispatched a reporter by the name of Nellie Bly to go around the world in 80 days, and I'd be testing her itinerary by going the opposite direction. I thought it was an outrageous request for me to embark on a trip around the world without a day's notice to prepare. But I accepted this proposal, for I know how fortunate I am to have this opportunity. Who am I to turn my back on a chance to see the world, to see places I've only read about? You see, I've been a writer all my life. Back in Louisiana, I wrote poetry for the women's section in my local newspaper. My family lost everything in the war between the states, and I learned long ago not to turn a good job down. I moved to New York with $50 to my name and started writing about the disenfranchised in New York, specifically women, who to this day are expected to live by the law of this land without a voice in electing those who make these laws. The attention we would receive, if we survived this undertaking, would give us a platform to share the issues that women face and help further our cause. Years ago, Susan B. Anthony said, "Careful, cautious people can never bring about a reform." At last, I understood what she meant. Now was the time for courage and conviction if we really wanted to see reform and equality for women. This is an opportunity I would have never gotten again. I would have been a fool to turn this down. And I am most certainly not a fool.
Extra, extra! A typhoon in Colombo puts Bly's trip in danger, while Elizabeth Bisland is being quarantined in a smallpox outbreak. People are making bets and crowding the streets just to get a newspaper and find out where the Globetrotting girls will be next. These women are making—
Get off that soapbox, kid! People, do not encourage this behavior. These women are setting a bad example of what is expected of them. They should be at home, not on a trip around the world. They are making the citizens of our country act like animals, betting their hard-earned dollars on who will come back first. If they even come back, do we really want to teach our young women to live such scandalous lives? This yellow journalism is nothing but another one of Pulitzer's stunts to sell more newspapers, and you fools are falling into his trap. Men, take charge of your women. Be the leaders of the house. Be the man God created you to be. This is absurd.
On January 25th, 1890, I returned back to New York for my race around the world. I made the trip in 72 days with plenty of time to spare.
Just 4 days later, I also arrived in New York, proving that this trip could be done, and it could be done by women.
Because of the trip, every newspaper in America wanted their own female reporter, and young, competent women were lining up for the job.
We inspired young women to seek professions and careers and live independent lives.
As journalists and social reform advocates, our audience expanded and granted us access to interview suffragette Susan B. Anthony and anarchist Emma Goldman.
There is no doubt that what these ladies did in the journalism field was groundbreaking, but how they helped redefine the roles and expectations of women in the 19th century was even more significant. Nellie Bly and Elizabeth Bisland were not only racing around the world, they were racing through the very heart of the Victorian age.
We would never meet.
But our lives would be forever bound together because an unerring sense of social justice was always in our souls.
We helped the world see that women's rights are human rights, and all people deserve equality.
Our actions would advance the fight towards the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution, guaranteeing all women the right to vote.
As President John Quincy Adams said, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. And that is exactly what these women did.
Now if you would like like to ask us any questions, go ahead.
I have a question. You said that they never met. Did they know that they were going around the world at the same
Well,
time?
actually, it's a really funny story because when Nellie originally left on her trip, she didn't actually find out that Elizabeth Bisland had left, going the opposite direction until she was actually halfway around the world, and a person at a train station in Japan told her, you know, I don't think you're going to beat her. And she was like, what? I'm way ahead of time. And he was like, no, I don't think that's her name. And so then Nellie actually learned then and there that she was racing against someone.
And from then on, she started calling it a race instead of, well, like originally she was racing around the world. She was racing the fictional book, but she didn't have anyone she was actually racing. And so when she found out, she was like, okay, I gotta beat this chick. I need to.
And another funny thing is, as we said, they never met, but the closest they ever came to connecting was their ships actually passed in the middle of the night in the Indian Ocean, and that's the closest they ever came to seeing each other, because after the trip they never really, I don't know, they just didn't want to become best friends. Yeah.
They didn't have any interest
At
in
the
meeting
beginning
each other.
at the beginning of our research, I was like, oh my gosh, they probably became best friends after and spent their whole lives together, but they never met and they didn't really have any interest in meeting each other.
Like after the trip, directly after, Nellie Bly and Elizabeth Bisland were at once actually considered some of the most famous people in the world because they were doing this. And so when Nellie got back, she was absorbing all the fame and fortune and all the attention she was getting. And Elizabeth Bisland moved to Europe to get away from all of it. And so that was also probably another reason why they never met.
It was so different.
Yeah, they were also completely different people. Like Nellie Bly was a regular at the saloon, and Elizabeth Bisland had tea parties every Sunday night. So they're just completely different people who just weren't that interested in each other. But it was crazy how they were both so willing to do this for women.
Well, it sounded like it was mostly a race, but did y'all actually write articles and send them back to be published in your publications? And then if so, how did it affect the sales for your individual publications you worked for?
Oh, well, actually, the reason that Nellie Bly was able to go on the trip is because the owner of the world, Joseph Pulitzer, saw this as a great money-making idea. And so that's actually how Nellie got to go on the trip, but it became so much more than that. And they would, at certain stops, they would write back little messages that would be able to be sent on telegrams. And then the newspapers that they were writing for would like make this one sentence into this huge story to let everyone know where they were.
What inspired you all to pick this subject matter?
Well, actually, when we started our research for History Fair this year, we were choosing between like 7 different topics. We really didn't know what we wanted to do, and we had a lot of things on our list that we kept checking and seeing if it would fit like our team and our age, because it's hard for us as middle schoolers to pull off some characters and make them believable. And we just kept coming back to this topic, and we just really thought it fit us the best, like 2 girls and a boy that could play multiple characters. And also the story was just so cool. We were just like, we wanted to bring a new story to History Fair, because every year has Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, Susan B. Anthony. So we just wanted to bring a new story to History Fair this year. And we thought this was the perfect match.
What was the best thing you learned from your research? What was the coolest thing?
I think that the coolest thing I learned was that this trip was the equivalent to going to the moon in 1960, and so no one thought it could be done, but as we were going through our research, everyone was just doubting it, and then eventually as they were coming close to the end, everyone was like, oh my gosh, they're going to do this. And so it was just crazy because